I'm Shannon Bream.
I'm Tom Shalhoub.
I'm Maria Bartiromo, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Friday, February 14th, 2020. I'm Dave Anthony. As Mike Bloomberg rises in the national polls, the Democrat is facing more criticism from the president, and Eric Trump piles on.
He's spending millions and millions of dollars every day. He's clearly trying to buy an election, but where is he? I mean, he's not out there. He's not being seen. He's not having rallies. He knows that no one will show up for his rallies, and I just don't think he has the charisma to get across the finish line.
I'm Chris Foster. Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace is on to talk about the 2020 presidential race and President Trump post-impeachment.
Just imagine if it were Barack Obama doing it to protect one of his cronies. They'd be going out of their minds.
And I'm Brian Kilmeade. I've got the final word on the Fox News Rundown.
Just two contests into the 2020 race for the White House, one candidate stands out with the most momentum.
At stake in our present battle is the survival, actually, of our nation.
President Trump won big in Iowa, getting 97% of the vote in the Republican caucuses, prompting one of his two challengers, Joe Walsh, to drop out. Then the president won New Hampshire easily, so he's confident he'll again be the GOP nominee, facing one of the Democrats.
My only problem is I'm trying to figure out who is their weakest candidate. I think they're all weak.
That was at a rally Monday night in Manchester.
We have more in this arena and outside of this arena than all of the other candidates, meaning the Democrats, put together and multiplied.
In the primary the next day, the president got 85% of the vote of New Hampshire Republicans. Bill Weld just 9%, adding to the Trump momentum out of Iowa.
I mean, the enthusiasm there, Dave, was amazing.
His son, Eric Trump, is executive vice president of the Trump Organization.
I went and spoke at one of the caucus sites, and, again, my father was running pretty much unopposed, and, we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people show up at every caucus site wearing, Trump gear, bring their kids, bring their family. I walked into my room, they were chanting USA, USA, USA. I mean, the level of spirit in the state, again, on a night that no one had to come out because he was going to win the state, irrespective, and he's, again, running really unopposed, was unbelievable, and I think that kind of speaks to the sentiment of the country. Then obviously we had, the impeachment sham finished up. Nancy is kind of the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, the amount of money that we raised, we had 1.4 million new donors in the last quarter of last year, people who had never donated to a presidential campaign before, many of whom had never voted, that were donating to my father's campaign because of how upset they were. Then we had an absolutely amazing State of the Union, which was incredible to say the least. And the Democrats are coming off a horrible, couple weeks. Nancy Pelosi ripping up the State of the Union was just disgusting. It was a disgusting act. It was a disgusting gesture.
Now that it's after impeachment, they are still leading investigations. And one of the things, there's a story you've probably seen in the Washington Post on Thursday, that the House Oversight Committee is asking the Secret Service for information based on Washington Post reporting that the Secret Service has paid to the Trump companies nearly $500,000. You're charging him hundreds of dollars a night for rooms for a cottage in Bedminster, New Jersey at the Trump National Golf Club. What's your response?
It's disgusting. I see that story and it's disgusting. And I worked on that story quite a bit. And those writers are just David Fahrenholt. He's the hit person for the Washington Post who comes after my father every single day. And it's disgusting. They talk about the U.S. government paying $600 for a room at Mar-a-Lago, and it's not $600 for a room. It's $600 for many rooms, and you legally, by law, you have to charge them, the federal government, something. Otherwise, you get into all sorts of gift laws. We charge the United States government cost. We could go out and we could sell a room for $1,500 a night. There's very limited rooms. Mar-a-Lago is the hottest place in the world. We charge them cost. It's effectively housekeeping cost. And they go out and they say we charge $650 for a room, which was many rooms. And then they go off and they say, well, in Bedminster they take one room and they pay X amount per month. And when in reality it's many rooms and it's many other ancillary things. And again, we charge cost. We lose a fortune, having the United States government at our properties, and that's fine. My father from day one always said, this is the greatest calling, and we're willing to do that. And, if they stayed anywhere else, they'd be charged 10x what we charge because, again, we make zero profit on anything government related. But you'll have the crooks over at the Washington Post, they'll come out with stories, which is absolutely disgusting, talking about us, quote unquote, profiting off of government.
They write in the story, these payments show he has an unprecedented and largely hidden business relationship with his own government.
It's amazing the amount of money that we lose off of these stays. In fact, I joke all the time that I would like nothing more than to never have another person from the government stay at one of our properties because it displaces true paying guests, people who are using restaurants and using the facilities and using everything else. But it's disgusting what they do. I mean, It's really disgusting what they do.
Will you then, since you say you have all the information, will you just hand it over to the House Oversight Committee and say this is the truth? Here it is. The Post is wrong.
Excuse me, David. They're not asking it of us. They're asking it of the United States government. They're not asking this of Trump Organization. They're asking it of the United States government. And no, I'm not about to hand over what the Secret Service protocols is and how they protect the President of the United States. No, that's something I wouldn't do.
There is a big controversy about Roger Stone, a longtime Trump associate convicted in the Russia probe. 4 prosecutors withdrew from the case when the Department of Justice intervened, calling for a lighter sentencing next week, after the president said that a 9-year prison term recommendation was ridiculous. The DOJ says it acted on its own, but Democrats are calling for Attorney General Bill Barr to resign. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
What is more stinking than the most powerful person in the country literally changing the rules to benefit a crony guilty of breaking the law?
What does Eric Trump say?
In this country, I think people have seen it. There's unequal justice, and that is evidently clear. 2 days ago, you had a wild lunatic, hop in a pickup truck and try and crash through a voter registration site, in Florida. You probably saw the story.
Absolutely, yeah.
He tried to kill conservatives who had a Trump sign who were registering, people to vote. These are young, volunteers of a campaign who are out there doing a job. This guy hops in a car and tries to kill them, gets arrested. You see things, and by the way, other than Fox News, and I give you guys a lot of credit, other than you guys, no one even brings up the story. ABC doesn't talk about the story. NBC doesn't talk about the story. CBS doesn't talk about the story. Not a single news organization. Now, if the roles were flipped and that was a Trump supporter who did that to somebody in a Make America Great hat, and they did that to Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or one of these other candidates, you better believe it's the only thing anybody would be talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's absolutely disgusting. I guarantee you no one would be talking about this. There would be no sentence for Roger Stone if he wasn't a Republican. And, vice versa, you look at the sentence that this kid will likely get. It probably pales in comparison to the sentence that they want to give Roger Stone. And I think what's become very evident to Americans in this country is that there's unequal justice. If you're a Republican, you will get thrown, down the tube for doing absolutely anything. But yet, if you're Loretta Lynch, if you're Hillary Clinton, who destroys 33,000, emails, if you're, James Comey, and all the fraud that were perpetrated there, if you're other people in that circle, if you have a D in front of your name, you can get away with absolute murder.
You mentioned some of the Democratic candidates. I want to go through some of them with you. Bernie Sanders. Is that a candidate that you hope that your father has against in November, that he has that Sanders wins the nomination? Do you hope that?
Yeah, absolutely, Dave. But, truthfully, I kind of hope he runs against any of these people, and I obviously he will, one of them, right? So, I'd probably answer yes to any of the candidates if you threw their name in there. But listen, Bernie's a guy who wants 85% taxes in this country. You would bankrupt every business in this nation. There's no question about it. He wants to strip health care from 180 million Americans who have private health care plans that they really like. And you've talked a lot about how bad the health care systems are in this country. The one thing that works well is private health care. He wants to take away 180 million private health care plans. That's people, that's families, that's plans that children are on, that's union plans in this country. He wants to strip them, and he wants to hand that over to the U.S. government. The Democrats, a week ago in Iowa couldn't count 170,000 votes, yet they want to be responsible for running health care for the entire nation and stripping it away from, companies and people who do health care really, really well, and private plans, which people like and work. And again, it's probably the only thing in our health care system, that works.
Pete Buttigieg, if he were the nominee, Would he, as more moderate, would that worry you?
No, I don't. Listen, I just don't think Pete has a chance for a whole lot of reasons. First of all, he wasn't a good mayor in South Bend. There's tremendous racial divide in that city that was caused by a lot of various things that he did. He's really got no experience. I don't think he can do it. I think we'd be thrilled to go against Pete. I just don't think he can do it.
I then asked Eric Trump about Mike Bloomberg, who's been rising in the polls in the Democratic race for president, now in double digits. He's run a ton of ads on TV, and one shows a lot of unflattering pictures of the president playing golf.
People have said when you were mayor, the city gave Trump a contract to operate a golf course. Yes, that's true, but he was the only bidder, and running a golf course is the only job that I would hire him for.
Well, on Thursday, President Trump again derided Bloomberg as Mini Mike, in a tweet calling him a 5'4" mass of dead energy. Well, Bloomberg tweeted back a short time later, "We know many of the same people in New York. Behind your back, they laugh at you and call you a carnival barking clown. They know you inherited a fortune and squandered it with stupid deals and incompetence." And then Bloomberg added, "I have the record and the resources to defeat you, and I will." On Thursday, the former New York City mayor campaigned in North Carolina, one of the Super Tuesday states in March.
The one thing you can't buy in the world is personality, and I know Bloomberg. We know him obviously from being from New York, and Dave, if you look at all the people who have done well in presidential elections over the years, look at Bill Clinton, right? I mean, Bill Clinton has a certain charisma, has a certain personality that people were drawn to. Barack Obama has a certain charisma and personality that people were drawn to. Ronald Reagan has a personality and kind of charisma and brand that people are drawn to, were drawn to, still are drawn to. My father clearly had the same thing. I mean, he could bring 30, 40, 50,000 people into a rally, and people would be chanting USA. I mean, there's just tremendous enthusiasm for him. I think you see that every day. You saw that with the Iowa turnout. You saw that in New Hampshire. I mean, his numbers in New Hampshire were the highest in the history of that primary by a lot. I see that every single time I go to a rally, or every single time I post something about my father on Twitter, or every time I walk down the street. The one thing you can't buy is personality and enthusiasm and love. There's something that these candidates had. It's a little twinkle in their eye. It's something. And I can tell you, we know Bloomberg well enough, and he certainly doesn't have that. And I don't think Mike Bloomberg can get the Bernie voters because they detest everything that he stands for, which is kind of a wealthy capitalist, etc. He's certainly not going to get anybody on the right. He's gun grabbing. He wants to take away his guns. I think the racial comments where, many more black people should be being arrested than white people, as Bloomberg, like to say. I think that's going to disqualify him in more ways than one. Some of those statements, and it's not just the statement, but the way he actually said the statement were pretty disgusting.
But your father was a supporter of the stop and frisk program, wasn't he?
Yeah, no, but I think it's different. First of all, he ran away from stop and frisk. My father's a supporter of keeping law enforcement officers safe in this country and allowing them to do their jobs. I mean, he's spending millions and millions of dollars every day. He's clearly trying to buy an election, but where is he? I mean, he's not out there. He's not being seen. He's not having rallies. He knows that no one will show up for his rallies, and I just don't think he has the charisma to get across the finish line.
Eric Trump, as always, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, David.
This is Brian Kilmeade with your Fox News commentary. Coming up.
Bernie Sanders now leads in most polls after Iowa and New Hampshire.
We are going to unite together and defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country.
Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren are looking to bounce back.
It ain't over, man. We're just getting started.
Our campaign is best positioned to beat Donald Trump in November because we can unite our party.
There's Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar, both strong in New Hampshire.
A fresh outlook is what makes new beginnings possible. It is how we build a new majority.
I cannot wait to win the nomination.
Then there's Mike Bloomberg, who hasn't been on a ballot yet and still averages third in national polls.
We're here to build a country that we can be proud of and to get things done and to do it in a united way, and that's what we're going to do.
So, There may be a front runner in Sanders, but no one close to looking like the surefire nominee.
The race is shaping up a little bit, although it's remarkably muddled still.
Chris Wallace is the host of Fox News Sunday.
Clearly, Bernie Sanders seems to be winning in the left, the liberal lane. Elizabeth Warren has performed very badly for somebody who had invested so much time, so much money, so much effort in Iowa and New Hampshire. I'm not quite sure how she survives. She has basically taken down all of her money for ads in South Carolina and Nevada. And then, of course, you get to Super Tuesday when there's real money to be spent, and she doesn't have any of it. So I think she's in real trouble. And then Joe Biden has shown once again that he's not a very good general election or, Democratic primary national election candidate. And it does seem that the two people who have some momentum and traction there are Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar. And then, of course, there's Mike Bloomberg, who's going to be there with an unlimited amount of money and campaign budget coming on Super Tuesday. So, it seems that it's the Bernie lane, and then there's this middle lane, which is a little crowded with the mayor and Senator Klobuchar and Mayor Bloomberg.
A few months ago, I really thought that Warren was going to be this unity candidate, and she says she still can be, but you're right, you need money.
Yeah, and, she wasn't campaigning as a unity candidate because she was a little bit to the right of Bernie Sanders, but she was all for Medicare for all. And, it was so interesting because every candidate gets their turn in the barrel. Nobody gets through a race without having a time when there's an embarrassment, there's some past statement that comes up. And you see, the good politicians from the bad in terms of, one, how they're able to power through it, to explain it, whether they can keep their support. Lord knows we saw that with Donald Trump multiple times in 2016. Elizabeth Warren was, at one point, she was the hot candidate into the summer and early fall. But when she backed off Medicare for all, when she was asked in one of those debates have had an impact here. And I think it was Amy Klobuchar who went after her and said, you got an idea, but you don't have any way to spend it and then to pay for it. And then in the fall, she came up with her plan, and it just seemed awfully expensive. And, when she said that there's not going to even have to raise taxes, it's all going to come out of taxing for rich people, but the average person who's getting the Medicare for all is going to have to pay for it. She sank like a rock, and she just has not recovered.
Well, Joe Biden makes a point, as have others, that maybe it's time to talk about Iowa and New Hampshire losing this stranglehold on the beginning of the process. They're too small, they're too white, they're not representative of the country or the party. Now, like, for example, if South Carolina had gone first, we might be talking about Joe Biden running away with this.
Yeah, that's an interesting sort of political science point. We can talk about it in 2021 and 2 and what the Democrats are going to do in the 2024 cycle, but it's too late for him to make that point now. If he had done that, and at one point they were talking about doing that, basically ignoring the first two states and focusing on Nevada and South Carolina, which are coming in the next 2 weeks and obviously have a lot more minorities, maybe he could have sold it. But the problem was that late last summer, his own people went to him and said, you can't lose and do terribly. You're the front runner. You're the guy who's leading the whole field nationally by 10 points or more, and you can't just ignore Iowa and New Hampshire and all the buzz and all the momentum that will go. So he went all in, and he spent a lot of money and a lot of time, particularly in Iowa. Remember, he had that 1 week bus tour, the No Malarkey bus. I thought that was an odd choice, the No Malarkey bus. The 1930s, and they're calling for their cliches back.
You don't hear a lot of kids these days saying malarkey?
Yeah, that's right. So he didn't have the courage to make that argument or to live by that argument and just ignore the states. And so he got involved. And if you're going to get involved and try and you lose, and when your whole argument is electability, that I've got, that I can win. I'm the only one that can beat Donald Trump, but you can't beat the other Democrats in Iowa and you can't beat them in New Hampshire. Electability kind of goes out the window.
So Nevada's in a week and a half, then South Carolina a week after that, and then Super Tuesday, where Michael Bloomberg's putting a lot of Fabergé eggs into those states. Now, anecdotally, I hear a lot of Democrats saying, by the election, I don't care. I don't care about stop and frisk. I don't care about any of it. I don't care if he was a Republican, just beat Trump. And that seems to be Bloomberg's argument.
Well, it is. I mean, he's taken some real heat now because he was a mayor for 3 terms, 12 years, and like a lot of billionaires, he was kind of imperious. So instead of like defending stop and frisk, he said, we need to take these young African Americans and throw them up against a wall. And he's talking about redlining now, which is the bank process, procedure of just redlining maps and saying we're not going to lend money in these poor African American neighborhoods, and saying that was really the cause of the whole housing crisis. It wasn't. It played a role. But, he's going to have to live with his past statements and some of his past record, and there's a limit to how much you can apologize. But the main point, and I'm agreeing with you on this, Chris, is that I think in a normal race, if it were just, 2016 and the Democrats were running and the Republicans were running, he'd be sunk by that. But the animus in the Democratic Party for Donald Trump, in our exit polls, 75%, they were asked, well, how would you describe your feelings towards the Trump presidency? And 75% said angry. And so a lot of them are going to hold their nose and vote for somebody they wouldn't normally vote for, just if they're convinced that Mike Bloomberg is the ticket to getting Donald Trump out of the White House.
You see the tweets back and forth between Bloomberg. Also seems like he's more willing to go on the president's level, and I don't mean that as a height joke. I just mean in terms of harshness and the personalness of the insults.
Well, it's one of the reasons why I think a lot of political reporters, including me, would love to see, not that I'm, rooting for any particular outcome, but a Trump-Bloomberg general election would be just great to cover, because there's no question that Michael Bloomberg gets under Donald Trump's skin in a way that none of these other candidates do, because he attacks him at his strengths, not his weakness. I mean, he's the only one who can credibly say, I'm a real billionaire, and talk about Donald, and you've got one billionaire, allegedly, Donald Trump, who is certainly imperious in his own way, and you've got Michael Bloomberg, who's just as imperious, and it would be great to cover. There's no question about it. It would be the best show in town for the final 6 months of 2020.
And with you. Last time we talked, there had also been no impeachment yet. Now that's over. As expected, the president has been completely conciliatory and humbled by the experience.
Yes, he's learned his lesson.
It seems to me that neither side is taking the win here. He, instead of just saying, look, I'm vindicated, I'm moving on, he's exacting revenge, I suppose, if you want to call it that. And the Democrats could be saying, look, we shined a light on the president's behavior, but now, instead of just moving on, they're talking about more and more investigations.
I couldn't agree more. That I think that it was an ugly chapter. You can argue whether or not it was worth doing for the Democrats. You can argue how strong or weak the case was against the president. But it seems to me that most people in this country, the last thing they want to do is go down this road again. And we seem to be headed not necessarily to impeachment, but down this road of the president doing things that are very questionable. I think weighing in on the sentencing. It wasn't a guideline. It was a recommendation by prosecutors. And then the recommendation gets changed. And now he's attacking the judge. I think that's all really misguided on his part. And just, for those listeners out there, just imagine if it were Barack Obama doing it to protect one of his cronies. They'd be going out of their minds. And conversely, I think and you're hearing people like Eric Swalwell say, well, maybe we're going to impeach again. Insane. Just insane. Both sides need to focus on actually helping people deal with the problems that they face in this country, whether it's the economy or jobs or education or health care or foreign policy, whatever. They need to be focusing on that and not, staying in this kind of politics of personal destruction. And I think both sides are guilty of it and falling into the trap again.
Chris Wallace, Fox News Sunday host, thanks again.
Thank you, Chris.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network. Download and listen to the Media Buzz Meter with Howard Kurtz. Howie picks 5 stories, most important to the most entertaining to the buzziest. Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com. America's listening to Fox News.
And now, some good news with Tanya J. Powers. Major Bill White is a Marine Corps veteran, spending 30 years on active duty and 54 retired. He served in World War II and was awarded a Purple Heart for surviving the Battle of Iwo Jima. And at 104, one of the ways he stays busy is scrapbooking. This Valentine's Day, he's got a few more things to put in those books. He made a request of the public for Valentine cards.
I have really no reason, no personal reason. It's just that saving cards, I guess, is part of my life.
The request worked, and he got some. Okay, he got a lot, 200,000 of them. He was not expecting that.
It just floors me. This is something that's never happened to me before in my life, and I doubt if it will ever happen again.
As to what he's going to do with all those Valentines.
Well, the first thing I'll do is I'll get together with some of the top people who have been instrumental in my doing what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And we'll make a selection of each one of them will have ideas of what they want to do would like to do with them, and then we will do whatever we can and hopefully make everybody happy.
He says he saves every card he's sent and that they become a personal part of his history. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
It's time for your Fox News commentary.
Brian Kilmeade.
What's on your mind?
The most intriguing part about this election season so far has to be the candidacy of Mike Bloomberg. He's already bucked conventional wisdom. He is third on most national polls, on most national averages, yet he did the impossible, the unforgivable. He said, goodbye, Iowa, not interested in New Hampshire. I'm not even going to compete in Nevada, and I don't care if you put me in the debates, even though he's going to be in the debates. But he is competing now, so now he is open game. And his greatest asset has turned into his greatest albatross, and that is his track record. He was tough on crime. He cracked down in high crime areas because, in many cases, the stats show minorities were located there. And he talked about that, and he was cavalier about that, and somewhat condescending in doing it, but the results were there. But the problem is Mike Bloomberg has already apologized for what he did in minority communities, and that is bring safety and security. But he did it by cracking down, in some cases, on minorities. So, are you following how Mike Bloomberg is now twisted into a pretzel? He's got to fight his own words and his own policies that he already apologized for, yet he wants to run on his record in New York City. Hey, Mayor Mike or Mini Mike, whatever you go by these days, you can't have it both ways. You can't apologize for low crime at the same time taking credit for low crime. Talking about redlining in districts and the collapse of in 2008 of the market and blaming redlining, giving people credit that didn't deserve it by past criteria or at all in current criteria. Guess what? In a lot of those cases, they were minorities. You are trying to win the minority vote to get the Democratic nomination. So, how do you do that, Mike? Running from your own comments. You can't even say it's how people are characterizing your comments. These are your comments and your words. So far, your crisis management with all your money and all your billions and all your ads has been terrible. Take a day off. Don't run an ad for a day or two. Don't make a mediocre appearance in front of a crowd that's mildly interested in you. Take a step back and think, how do I defend my record effectively and in a way that has credibility? The president's got to come after what you did. You could mock him all you want, but that's playing his game. You have to act like a billionaire who is self-made. Your other problem is your investment in China and how you don't look at China as an enemy, as a competitor. We all know they're an enemy, military and economically. We have evolved to that point. The president effectively showed us he was 100% right and has taken them on. The last thing we need is to step back. Redlining, stop and frisk, China. 3 hurdles for Mini Mike to scale. I'm not sure he's up to it. We're all about to find out. I'm Brian Kilmeade. Make sure you listen to my radio show wherever you get it, Eastern Time, 9 to noon, wherever you can.
You have been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to Fox News Radio's hourly newscast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, visit foxnews.com. Download The One with Craig Gutfeld.
Jennifer Hermott.
My ex-husband, Neil Haggerty, we wrote all the songs together, but then he pieced out and didn't want anything to do with the mixing.
Right.
So, you're putting stuff in my lap, and you're going to get a little bit of my flavors.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com.